Hi everyone, I am CA Veepsa Patni. I hope we all are keeping safe and taking care of our families. This is another session by us to you from the TP and International Tax series. Considering that the last session was found useful and insightful by you all, I hope that you enjoyed this session too and let us know about any suggestion you would like to give us in the comment section below. When I started my career in transfer pricing, so just reading through the act or sections never helped me to grow as a professional. So that approach of mixing, of intermingling the practical aspect of transfer pricing analysis, international taxation, along with a constant reading of the literature of the act helped me to actually get a practical perspective towards this field of taxation. So this session would also be a mix of giving you a practical perspective on the transfer pricing report and also starting with reading through the literature of the sections of the act. Considering that only act and reading through the literature will not give us an exact perspective or logic or background of why that section was wrote or why that term was at the first place defined in that act, in the sections, would actually bring this analysis to a mundane reading of just the act or a book or a literature. So considering that, I have put together the practical perspective also in this session, and let's get started with revising and reviewing what we learned and what we touched upon in the last session. So as I told you that transfer pricing is basically the price at which an enterprise transfers or transacts or deals with another associated enterprise. So, if ABC India transacting with ABC Singapore, this both two entities being a part of the same group, if they transact with each other, the price at which they transact will be the transfer price. Now, the logic of bringing transfer pricing and valuation into picture was that this transfer price should should be similar to the arm's length price. So, what is arm's length price? As I told you last time, arm's length price means any price at which two independent entities transact, because there is no influence on any kind of transaction, there is no influence of one entity on another. Therefore, the prices are not manipulated, the prices are at fair distance, the prices are fairly evaluated and priced according to whatever the market scenario is. So, this transfer price is vis-a-vis similar to arm's length principle. That is exactly what transfer pricing analysis is all about. To justify that transfer pricing is actually matching to the arm's length principle, to justify that whatever transaction ABC India is having with its parent or any associated enterprise in any foreign jurisdiction, it is very important for an assessee, for a taxpayer, for the company to maintain proper documentation. Or else, how will you justify that this price, this transfer price at which you are transacting with your associated enterprise is at arm's length principle? There has to be a very justified and supported documentation, very robust documentation to support that analysis, that evaluation which you have already done before undertaking that transaction or while undertaking that transaction. This is a three-tier documentation we maintain for transfer pricing compliances. It is local file, master file, and country by country reporting. So the local file is basically nothing but the TP study report. The TP report is a detailed analysis of each and every aspect of that international transaction which you have undertaken with your associated enterprise in the foreign jurisdiction. If being a consultant, if you're given a TP report of any client, or if you are given a detailed um, past TP studies maintained by the company, by the entity, you can 70 to 80% get an idea about the business of the whole group, about the business of the entity which is there in question, about what international transaction those entities undertook with each other, about whether the transfer prices, whether the transaction was undertaken keeping in mind and justifying the arm's length principle, and what exactly are the functions, the activities performed by each of those entities in their foreign jurisdictions, in their respective jurisdiction. So, this part, this file, this TP report is the body, the core of any transfer pricing analysis. Without maintaining and without evaluating and without analyzing all these aspects of any international transaction and maintaining that via a TP documentation, no international transaction can be justified. Because when things come into scrutiny, when the transfer pricing officer bring about catches any of your international transaction, he would definitely ask you that how are you justifying that this international transaction has been done at arm's length principle? Please show me that supporting document. So what will you show? We will show this TP report at the time when we are asked for. Please note that this document is not to be filed um, with any portal or with any government authority annually, but there's a mandatory requirement to keep that document in place, to maintain that document every year with all the justifications, with all your supportings intact along with this document. Through this transfer pricing report, I'll take you through the series of the 92 to 92F sections, and from that, it will gradually be interesting to pick up on these sections. Because had we started just reading through the sections and reading through the act, firstly, it would have been really mundane. And secondly, when we do not know the concept or a background of any section, of any definition, of any parameter defined in the act, as a consultant we would be all blank, and it would just, as I said, would be reading through the literature of the act and not getting into the details and basics of why that section at the first place was defined. So 92D section talks about the maintenance of transfer pricing documentation, maintenance of your mandatory documents to justify the arm's length principle, arm's length price, which you have must have taken into mind while transacting with your associated enterprise. So, as I learned when I was growing in this field of taxation, so I learned with D. So 92 is anyway the series for transfer pricing, and D stands for documentation. So we can all very easily remember that 92D talks about the documentation to be maintained to justify transfer pricing and to evaluate your functions, your transactions, and to give a very detailed overview of the business of the group as well as the entity for which this document is being maintained, say your Indian entity. Now, it starts with a structure. So, transfer pricing report is basically having a strict structure. There is no flexibility or in any of basically it is maintained as per the OECD structure. OECD, if you remember, is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So it has given a definite structure that what all should be included in a transfer pricing report. It starts with the business and structure of the M&E group. That what exactly is the business of the group? ABC group karta kya hai? Maybe it is dealing with, say, electronic goods. So it might happen that Singapore entity, ABC Singapore, is manufacturing those electronic goods and then selling those goods to ABC India, while ABC India might be the distributor and it is selling those goods in the Indian market. So by reading that global overview of the business of the group, you actually get a detailed idea that exactly business hai kya. Then it talks about the relationship. It talks about why those two entities or three entities or four entities, why all those entities are actually related, and how we evaluate, how we come to a conclusion, what all parameters we see to conclude that these two enterprises are associated, is whatever is given in section 92A. So that is how section 92A comes into picture. Section 92A tells us that why two entities and when two entities will be defined, will be concluded to be called associated. It has given numerous parameters, एक बहुत सारे क्राइटेरिया दिए हुए हैं. उस क्राइटेरिया में कोई भी किसी भी क्राइटेरियन में अगर वो फॉल कर रही है दो एसोसिएटेड एंटरप्राइज की रिलेशनशिप, then those two enterprises would be associated enterprise. So that is how this section becomes the starting of your transfer pricing analysis. जब तक आपको यही नहीं पता होगा कि दो entities related कैसे है, आप conclude ही नहीं कर पाओगे, and the whole analysis will come to a halt. So that is why it all starts with 92A. Then the structure continues, and then TP report talks about the international transaction. What exactly is international transaction? So there is transaction and then you add another word, international. तो ऐसा कुछ तो डेफिनेशन होगा कि ट्रांजैक्शन कब इंटरनेशनल ट्रांजैक्शन होगी, वो डेफिनेशन, वो पैरामीटर 92B में डिफाइंड है. सो टिल द टाइम you do not know that what is an international transaction, how to analyze an international transaction, एक transaction है, वो international transaction है भी या नहीं है, आप आगे फिर से नहीं बढ़ सकते हो. So 92B में international transaction क्या है, कौन से parameters है, वो define किया गया है. Then the report talks about functions, contributions made by each enterprise. This is a very underrated section in a transfer pricing report, but considering the BEPS action plans and considering that everything is revolving around value chain analysis, तो एक transaction में किसने क्या contribution किया, किसने क्या function perform किया, जब तक हमें यही नहीं पता होगा, we will not be able to understand that कितना profit किस entity के jurisdiction में जाना चाहिए. Say if ABC Singapore is manufacturing electronic goods and it is selling those goods to ABC India, which is a distributor for ABC Singapore, we have to see that which of this function is the core function in the international transaction which is being undertaken. क्या manufacturing एक core function है या Indian market or selling into the Indian market a core function है, because दोनों ही important है. So it involves a very detailed interview, it involves a very detailed discussion, a functional a conversation, a functional interview on that what exactly and how important are these two functions or these three functions in that transactions. हो सकता है the goods are being manufactured by ABC Singapore, but considering Singapore doesn't have any market there, and the main market and the main customer base comes from the Indian market. So that way, in ABC India also becomes a very important part in that transaction. These details are to be captured by a transfer pricing consultant while analyzing the transactions, when analyzing so many documents maintained by the companies, and then have to be captured in your transfer pricing report. Then it talks about selecting the best method. It talks about economic analysis. आप किस method से transfer price निकाल रहे हो, आप किस method से ये देख रहे हो कि transfer pricing justified है, arm's length principle पे है. That is basically economic analysis. That is basically 92C. So C say we can remember computing arm's length price. Okay. So 92C मतलब computing arm's length price. कैसे compute करना है? By selecting the best method. बहुत सारे methods दिए हुए हैं. Gradually we'll also learn वो method क्या है, वो कौन सा मेथड कब यूज होता है, दैट्स अ डिटेल्ड इवैल्यूएशन, दैट्स अ वेरी वेरी एक्सट्रीमली important part of any transfer pricing analysis. Then it's basically concluding if. I have put if because हमेशा वो ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग जस्टिफाइड हो ऐसा नहीं होता, एंड दैट इज वेयर द जॉब ऑफ अ ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग कंसल्टेंट कम्स इनटू पिक्चर. As a business, as an entity, they might not know that their transaction is matching with the arm's length principle or not. So they will approach us and ask that what and how should that transaction be designed, how should that transaction be undertaken so that it matches the fair prices, it matches the arm's length principle. So it involves a detailed activity, benchmarkings, economic analysis, your functional analysis to justify the entity has transacted at ALP or not. And this is section 92, where actually the 92 series begin. We are not as consultants are not allowed or shouldn't ever disclose any client's transfer pricing report, um, because there are so many intricate nitty-gritties involved and detailed evaluations and details involved regarding a business. But this document is actually a structure which I would take you through, and let's see that how this report is actually maintained. So this is a brief idea to give you on how and what exactly is a transfer pricing study. It starts with a normal format like any document is. Here is the name of the group, the name of the entity, and for which period it is maintained. Then comes the table of contents, and then comes the executive summary. We generally underrate these two sections. We think that table of contents it's nothing, it's just an index. And what is executive summary? It's nothing, it's just summarizing the whole report. But if these two sections are not maintained, are not properly detailed out and properly looked into, can create a little bit of mess while discussing the report with your management, with your managers, or with your clients, because the content actually tells you what exactly is covered in this transfer pricing report. As I told you, any transfer pricing report has a fixed structure. पहले एग्जीक्यूटिव समरी होगा, फिर इंडस्ट्री ओवरव्यू होगा, group overview hoga, control transactions, that means your international transaction overview hoga, etc, etc. So by looking on the list of contents, any management tells you or may ask that where is this section, or take me through this and this section. This section needs to be real time, this section needs to be catered to, and while discussing the report with your management, the executive summary should be on point. As the name itself is suggesting, executive मतलब मैनेजमेंट. आपके किसी भी मैनेजमेंट के पास या एक सीनियर के पास, सीनियर पार्टनर के पास इतना टाइम नहीं होता है that he will read through a 100-pager TP study report. I've even seen TP study reports being a 400-pager or an 800-pager. It actually it's a huge document to read through in a 15 to 20-minute meeting. So what your management or what your seniors would just be interested in for the timing would be everything captured in your executive summary. So executive summary captures the core of the report and the body of the report in a very summarized point. Overview, economic analysis, what the best method you chose, what exactly is the transaction and how it is evaluated, and what the business is all about, and whether the transactions are at arm's length or not. This is just an idea to give you so that आपका एक perspective develop हो, आपको पता चले कि TP documentation होता क्या है. That's how you will build interest in this field, and you will find some interest in reading through the literature of the act, because अगर हम सिर्फ act पढ़ेंगे, section पढ़ेंगे और हमें पता ही नहीं है कि वो use कहाँ हो रहे हैं transfer pricing analysis में, it would become really mundane for all of us and we will not get a practical perspective towards this field of area. Then it talks about your organization structure. As I told you that group overview क्या होता है वो बहुत जरूरी है. कैसे वो दो कंपनीज रिलेटेड है आपको ये बताना पड़ेगा. जनरली वी टेल दिस थ्रू अ फ्लो चार्ट. हम ग्राफिकली भी इसको बता सकते हैं और जैसे यहाँ पर दिया हुआ है हम तब वैसे भी इसको बता सकते हैं. बट हम द मेन मोटिव ऑफ दिस सेक्शन इज टू टेल दैट दिस ग्रुप में this entity says holding 100% of shares or say 99.99% of shares in say ABC India, and that is why that is how they are associated, because 92A section talks about this relationship of shareholding, that if so and so percentage of shares is held by one entity in another, that defines a kind of control, a management, and that's how two entities would be associated. तो ये relationship बताना हमारे लिए बहुत जरूरी होता है. And that organizational structure only defines that what exactly is your 92A section. Then it's all about corporate overview. जैसे मैंने आपको बताया business overview. Corporate means M&E, means your group, कि group करता क्या है, why this group is maintaining this documentation, what business it is handling, why it is undertaking this international transaction. So as you can see, principal business activity. Then you will also tell that what markets it is catering to, what exactly are its products, how exactly it is manufacturing those products, whether it has its own manufacturing facility or it is acquiring those goods from somewhere. What exactly is that overview of global business, that is very important. Also the overview of the specific entity. Say in our case, if we are talking about ABC India, what business it is doing. As I gave you an example, if ABC India is just into distribution, so we'll define that it acquires, it procures the goods, the finished goods from ABC Singapore, and what it does in Indian market is distribute those goods. वो वहां से लेकर आता है सिंगापुर से, and then it sells those goods to the Indian customer. So that is basically its function. It also does marketing activity to find out new customers or support in capturing new customer base in India. And that is how you give a detailed overview of the whole business of the group as well as the specific entities. Then it talks about the section on international transaction. Controlled transaction मतलब international transaction. Uncontrolled transaction मतलब जहाँ पर दो entities independent है, कोई control नहीं है, कोई association नहीं है, कोई relation नहीं है. So controlled means international transaction. As I told you, it talks about, it gives a brief that what exactly is the transaction undertaken. जैसे यहाँ एक टेबल बना हुआ है, वैसे ही आप कोई भी ट्रांजैक्शन जो हो रही है आप यहाँ पर उसको रिपोर्ट करेंगे, डिस्क्लोज करेंगे, एंड यू विल टेल से ABC India is procuring or it's purchasing goods from ABC Singapore and distributing. What is the value? This is the value. Then it all starts with your functional analysis. Functional analysis मतलब क्या क्या फंक्शन हो रहे हैं इस ट्रांजैक्शन में. जैसे यहाँ पर फंक्शंस लिखे हुए हैं, these are general functions which you will find in most of your transfer pricing analysis. अगर ऐसा बिजनेस है तो वेयर हाउस ऑपरेशन कौन कर रहा है, इंस्टॉलेशन आफ्टर सेल सर्विस कौन कर रहा है, बिलिंग कलेक्शन कौन कर रहा है, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कौन कर रहा है. सो इन आवर केस इफ ABC Singapore is manufacturing, so we will say ABC Singapore is manufacturing and ABC India is not manufacturing. This is very important section, especially when BEPS action plan have come, because functions, risks and assets talk about कि एक ट्रांजैक्शन में वैल्यू कहाँ कहाँ और कैसे कैसे क्रिएट हो रहा है. जैसे जैसे जहां जहां वैल्यू क्रिएट हो रहा है वहां वहां उतना रेवेन्यू एलोकेट होना चाहिए. So functional analysis, your which includes your function, assets and risk, is the is the base of your economic analysis. You cannot do an economic analysis unless the details of the functions, assets and risks are not captured and are not known by you as a TP consultant. So, as I told you, all these functions are detailed out. You might be questioning yourself that how do you know these functions are done by this entity or that function is done by that entity. This all comes through the discussion with the client. He provides you with documents like agreements, he provides you with documents, your invoices, bills. So that's how you know that kya functions दोनों parties में agree किए गए हैं, and that is how you get an idea that these which function is performed by which entity in the group. Then comes economic analysis, which is nothing but benchmarking, which is nothing but selecting the best method, which is nothing but explaining that this transaction has been undertaken and the value of this transaction can be justified by using this method or that method, and then eventually concluding that whether this transaction is at arm's length or not. I am not going right now into the methods and how to compute arm's length price, because that we will read through when we are discussing on 92C section. But I just want to give an idea that this is how economic analysis looks. So you talk about each method, you talk about the method, and you tell that why this method is appropriate or not, why a specific method is chosen, and how to apply that method. So say if you choose a method, say TNMM, TNMM is transactional net margin method, and if you choose that method, you will justify and you will detail out that why this method was appropriate and why you are rejecting other methods to compute the arm's length price. Then the economic analysis talks about that which would be the tested party, as the name suggests. And for ease of reference, right now, tested party मतलब कौन सी पार्टी को आप टेस्ट करोगे, आप कौन सी पार्टी को पिक करोगे टू जस्ट ट्रांजैक्शन तो दोनों साइड हो रहा है, एबीसी सिंगापुर और एबीसी इंडिया. सो इफ द ट्रांजैक्शन इज एट आर्म्स लेंथ, तो मतलब दोनों साइड से ही वो आर्म्स लेंथ है, बट आप टेस्ट किसको करोगे, वो that party, the selection of that party and why that party was selected is basically this section. Then it talks about the margin of your entities. So say if your margin earned on the business which you are performing, say ABC India is earning 12% margin on the business it is performing, you will give that detail in this section. You will tell that how that 12% was arrived, and whether that 12% is the same margin, is the similar margin which is earned by other enterprises, other company in the similar industry. And that is how eventually we conclude that this transaction is at arm's length or not. It talks about the arm's length range. What is the range? What is the margin? We will talk about it later. But for now, if it is concluded that the transaction is at arm's length, the margin earned by your entity is same or similar to the margins which is earned by other entities in the market, that means that transaction has been undertaken at arm's length. Regulatory environment basically talks about your industry overview. When I was starting in TP and in the consultancy, this used to be the most underrated section of the document, and we would just, as freshers, as somebody who is starting their career, were never interested that why we are actually copy pasting, industry overview, why we are googling the details about a particular industry and pasting those details in our document and giving reference that how much what is the condition of industry right now in which the entities are working, or at what margins, or what are the business forecast of that particular industry where ABC India say is right now transacting or doing its business. But the best example and the best way we can right now understand that why industry overview is important is, say, due to COVID environment. So if your industry as a whole has been affected, right now, say if you are working in education industry, if your business is basically into education industry, and that has been actually affected, so that, and your margins have marginally dropped, say you were earning a 10% margin earlier and the margins were dropped to 6%. Now you might come into scrutiny that you actually were earning a very good profit, a very good margin at 10%. Now you're at 6%. So that's where your industry overview comes into picture. You will justify that I am not the only one whose profits have dropped. I am not the only one who have reduced its business transactions. I am not the only one whose customers have reduced. The whole industry have functioned like that. So if you have to compare my margin, do not compare it with my previous margin on an individual level. Compare it with the industry. So that's where your industry overview should be robust, very detailed, very real time, and very accurate. We do not suggest, or we should not ever copy paste whatever details were captured in your last year's industry overview. We should always capture the real time industry overview, because that is how you will justify your transactions, your margins in future. This section basically is the annexure section, which we'll talk later, that whatever computational details or number details or quantitative details we need to capture, we don't give those annexures, those benchmarking details in your main report. You give it as an annexure. So these are the details, these are the benchmarking sets, how you found your comparables, what keywords did you use to find those comparables, everything. These technical terms you will gradually understand when you will understand what benchmarking is, but these details we give as annexures. So I hope that we at least got an idea about what a transfer pricing report is. Now we get back to our presentation. Now we know that why we talked about these sections. We got an idea in exact detail that क्यों ये sections बहुत important है conclusion of transfer pricing analysis पे पहुंचने के. Unless हमें ये details पता ही नहीं होगी, हम transfer pricing का analysis का evaluation कर ही नहीं पाएंगे. So let's start with section 92A. Now that we know why 92A is very important to start your transfer pricing analysis, and we also saw that how it is captured in your TP report is the first and foremost section to tell um, the foreign, the stakeholders, the external stakeholders, the internal stakeholders, that how these enterprises are actually associated. So as I told you last time also, say there are two corporations. इन दो corporations में क्या relation है, whether they are associated or not, on what basis, on what parameter they are associated, that is defined by section 92A. So section 92A1, 92A के दो parts हैं, section 92A1 and section 92A2. दोनों ही sections are very important to evaluate the relationship between two enterprises, because section 92A1 depends upon section 92A2 in major part of the cases. In some parts there it is not even related, that we'll talk about later, but right now please do keep in mind that section 92A1 define करता है और section 92A2 पैरामीटर बताता है. So दोनों को साथ में ही पढ़ना पड़ेगा. These say there's a corporation X and there's a corporation Y. Now, directly or indirectly, I'll tell you the meaning of directly or indirectly later. But for now, say X corporation directly or indirectly has some control, or has infused any kind of capital, or manages. So या तो मैनेजमेंट के थ्रू, या तो कंट्रोल के थ्रू, या कैपिटल के थ्रू. अगर ये दो, अगर एक्स कॉर्पोरेशन is having a control over Y corporation, then these two enterprises will be associated enterprise. वही चीज 92A1 बताता है that if one entity directly or indirectly, one entity मतलब यहाँ X corporation, participates in management or control or capital, which I already told you, of another entity मतलब Y corporation, or management or control or capital of both entities is controlled directly or indirectly by a common entity. Say यहाँ पर एक Z corporation होता, and X corporation would have been managing or controlling Y and Z both. Then Y and Z corporation both would have been associated enterprise. I hope we all are clear on 92A1. It just says that एक कॉर्पोरेशन का दूसरी कॉर्पोरेशन में या तो मैनेजमेंट, या तो कंट्रोल, या तो कैपिटल होना बहुत जरूरी है फॉर दोज टू एंटरप्राइजेस टू बी associated. Now, how do you define management? How do you define control? How do you define capital? It's an abstract. आप कोई, मैं किसी और तरीके से मैनेजमेंट को डिफाइन कर सकती हूँ, आप किसी और तरीके से कंट्रोल को डिफाइन कर सकते हो. What exactly constitutes control or management or capital, that is talked about in section 92A2. So as per circular issued by ICAI, as per guidance note on transfer pricing analysis, also ICAI guidance note, section 92A2 was basically brought into picture to define कि management control capital है क्या. These are the 6 major heads under which we can divide those parameters which are defined in section 92A2. Shareholding interest, there's a particular percentage which is mentioned in this section which says that if so and so percentage से ज़्यादा, मतलब अगर 26%, if 26% से ज़्यादा का शेयर होल्डिंग एक एंटरप्राइज होल्ड कर रहा है दूसरे एंटरप्राइज में, then those enterprises would be associated enterprise. If you recollect what we also captured and what I also showed you in the transfer pricing, in the sample transfer pricing report, it talked about the shareholding pattern in the organizational structure. So that is how you define associated enterprise in major cases. आप जब आप एक ट्रांसफर प्राइसिंग एनालिसिस करना चाहते हैं, 90% ऑफ द केसेस में रिलेशनशिप एसोसिएशन जो है शेयर होल्डिंग पैटर्न पे ही मिलेगी आपको. वन पार्टी वुड बी द होल्डिंग कंपनी, देन अनदर पार्टी वुड बी a group entity or a subsidiary company of the group. So शेयर होल्डिंग पैटर्न से एसोसिएशन डिफाइन की जाती है. और से लेंडिंग और बोरोइंग, मतलब एक पर्टिकुलर परसेंटेज को एक्सीड करके एक पर्टिकुलर परसेंटेज की अगर लेंडिंग और बोरोइंग की गई है, से एक्स कॉर्पोरेशन हैज लेंड और गिवन a major chunk of the borrowing to Y corporation, then it will have some kind of influence or control over the business of Y corporation. This is actually not even tax. Okay, we are talking logic. So as I keep iterating, transfer pricing is all based on logic. It's all based on concept. It's all based on uh, you know a particular ideal. It is not something which is exactly defined in law. As we all say, TP is an art. It is not logic. It is not science. So it's all based on generic logic. अगर मैंने आपको आपके बिजनेस के लिए मेजर बोरोइंग दिया हुआ है, then that becomes my right that I will dictate you, I can dictate you, I can influence you, because if that borrowing is taken back from you, your business will suffer. So that is how control or management is also defined. So अगर शेयर होल्डिंग नहीं है लेकिन major chunk of the borrowing has been given by one corporation to another corporation, that is sheer logic that it also will have some kind of control over the other enterprise. Then appointment of directors. Again, it's very logical that if major part of your board of directors is elected, is chosen by me, मैं ही बता रही हूँ that ये XYZ, Mr. XYZ should be part of your board, and total board में है ही 5 लोग. So I will have an influence of, in fact, I already have an influence and a control over you. If I am dictating you, I am telling you who should be your board of directors. Then business dependency. Say, I am dependent on you for my raw materials. मुझे और कहीं से वो raw materials नहीं मिलते, but सिर्फ आपसे मिलते हैं, right? If you tomorrow decide to not transact with me, not undertake any business with me, my business would either get a shut off or would suffer marginally because my business is actually dependent on you. Tomorrow, if you say that give me a discount of 20% and I say no, I will give you a discount of only 10%. So what you will say, you might control me and tell me that no, then I'll withdraw my business from you, I'll withdraw my raw materials from you, and I'll have a a submission, I'll be submissive to you, you'll have a control over me. So this is how also two enterprises might be associated. Control over price of goods. If I am giving you some of the business or major chunk of the business. You are selling my finished products in the market. So I might control you. I might tell you that 90% of your business comes from the goods which I provide you. So I should have that much margin for me, and that is how I might control your business and the prices of those goods. ऐसे भी दो एंटरप्राइजेस एसोसिएटेड हो सकते हैं, कॉमन कंट्रोल और म्यूचुअल इंटरेस्ट. This is a very subjective area and involves a detail. In fact, every section here involves a very detailed analysis of your client's business. Why these sections or why these parameters were brought into picture? Because say if I do not have any shareholding in you, or I do not have any control from the shareholding perspective, but still I'm controlling your prices, still I'm influencing the transactions, and still I'm manipulating those prices. Again, it will lead to tax base erosion of that particular jurisdiction. So these parameters were very crucial to be brought in. Ki even if two entities are not directly, now you might understand gradually, धीरे धीरे आपको समझ में आ रहा होगा क्यों important है directly और indirectly को समझना. I think now we are getting a little bit clear. Directly मतलब पता लग रहा है कि मैंने आपके अंदर इतने shares होल्ड करती हूँ, अग्रीमेंट के बेसिस पे मैंने ही अपने एक सब्सिडरी खोली हुई है, तो मैं डायरेक्टली यू आर माय सब्सिडरी. बट देयर माइट बी इनडायरेक्ट मैनेजमेंट, इनडायरेक्ट कंट्रोल, इनडायरेक्ट इन्फ्लुएंस बेसिस ऑल दीज रेस्ट ऑफ दीज पैरामीटर्स. सो इसीलिए ये पैरामीटर्स पिक्चर में लाए गए. दैट ऐसे नहीं हो सकता है कि आप डायरेक्टली नहीं कंट्रोल करते हो एंड स्टिल यू आर able to evade the taxes and able to transfer major chunk of the revenue to another jurisdiction. This cannot happen. So even if these parameters are being satisfied, you will still be associated enterprises, and if you are undertaking any international transaction, you have to justify your transfer pricing. That is all from my side today. I hope you really had an enjoyable session, a practical perspective towards transfer pricing evaluation and analysis. I think reading through the section is important, is very important, but it only does your 50% of the work. And बाकी 50% तभी आपको समझ में आता है जब आप एक practical perspective के साथ you jump into that business environment. Now, that intermingling of the practical exposure, which as consultants which I can give you, because I also have learned while I was starting my TP career that your literature and your practicals should go hand in hand, and we will keep coming to you with detailed practical aspects of transfer pricing analysis and international taxation in the upcoming series. Please do give us your suggestions, or you can also reach out to me on the email ID which is being shown on the screen right now. And thank you so much. Hope you have great time ahead.